Welcome to Tales from the Bridge, and a very warm welcome to all our new listeners. We are talking to Daniel H. Wilson today, and you will not be disappointed with this conversation. He is awesome, and we get some really cool insight into his work in film now, and overall, what a great guy. We had a lot of fun. We really hope you enjoy this. All right, let's make our way over to the bridge.
We're very excited to have science fiction author Daniel H. Wilson joining us today from Portland. You are in Portland today, are you, Daniel?
That's right, Portland, Oregon.
Daniel has written 6 science fiction novels and a variety of short stories and graphic novels. He's also edited 3 anthologies of sci-fi short stories. His novels include Robopocalypse, which was a New York Times bestseller, and its sequel, Robogenesis. You may also have heard some of his other novels, including How to Survive a Robot Uprising, The Clockwork Dynasty, and Amped. Daniel is a robotics engineer with a PhD in robotics and a master's degree in machine learning and robotics. Daniel's most recent book is The Andromeda Evolution, which is an authorized sequel to Michael Crichton's novel, The Andromeda Strain. So thank you so much for being with us today, Daniel. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I got to ask you about that authorized sequel of what does that even mean? What is an authorized sequel?
So Michael Crichton passed away around 10 years ago, and there's various unfinished manuscripts and things like that, but they were kind of reaching out, talking to different authors about kind of continuing his legacy by just telling stories in the same worlds that he created. And so when I was talking to Sherry Crichton, who was his wife and runs the Crichton Son, which is kind of like the production company that takes care of all of the estate. I just pitched my favorite Crichton novel. Is really I think he knocked it out of the park right out of the gate with the Andromeda Strain. And I just pitched my favorite world and the sequel I would write. And they were like, that sounds incredible. Let's give it a shot. And so we collaborated and pitched a completely new story that there's so much world building and mythology around the Andromeda Strain. What is it? Where did it come from? All that. And so we really built that out. And, and I wrote it into a novel where it was an homage to Crichton's style, although I can't help but write in my own style. But it helps that we're both, he's trained as a medical doctor and he never actually practiced. He just started writing. He started writing when he was in medical school and then had a career right out of the gate as a writer. And I did the same thing, but for robotics. And so we both kind of had that technical background that you kind of is your foundation. And so it worked out. That was also a bestseller. It was a really cool, fun experience, humbling,
Well, it must have been surreal. We all would have been about the same age when Jurassic Park came out and other books of his being turned into film. That was my first exposure. So was he kind of a hero of yours or someone you looked up to before?
There was a period of time where I churned through all of his novels, I think a lot of people, you read, when you have an author like that, where you read a novel and you go, hey, okay, I like that. And then you go, let me go to the library and see if I can get 15 more of those. And so there was a period of time where I churned through all of those. But in terms of, the world building and stuff, I just always loved the Andromeda Strain and Sphere, it was another favorite of mine. But when I was a kid, I watched a lot of DuckTales, and there's this thing called the DuckTale ending, which is in a procedural. You've always got to leave things the same as they were at the beginning of the episode, and it used to drive me crazy that they'd always find the lost city of gold, and then it would be buried by an earthquake or whatever. And that's one of the things that Crichton does in a lot of his novels is he manages to take everything and put it back the way it was at the beginning, including the Andromeda Strain. And so, so that was really the only challenging thing that I've never agreed with. It always drove me crazy, but everything else I love, the style, building on those worlds, and modernizing it all too. Coming from the world of science, like when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I was shared an office with people from all over the world. You know, it was super diverse. I mean, you never know where somebody's going to be from, what gender, what all that stuff, what language they speak. And so that was really fun to bring that into the Andromeda evolution and really have like this, you know, because I'm not writing in the 60s or anything like that, like with the Andromeda strain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
did you have a lot of his notes to work from or anything, or did you have to just sort of do it all?
No, I mean, I collaborated with Crichton's son, but we really just cooked up a new story based on, I did have some notes, and I had all the collected interviews that he'd ever given about, there was some like really cool, like media research that they had done because they're they know everything about Crichton. They have everything. So, I had all that to build from, but, just trying to really figure out, making sure that it really honored his legacy and that I didn't, piss off his fans. But, I was really happy with how it turned out and with the whole thing because it's so fraught. It could go so very wrong, and I thought it went great.
Cool.
Well, it is a stressful thing, and you mentioned Sphere and Andromeda Strain, obviously, and those were actually my two favorite Michael Crichtons as well, and DuckTales, my very favorite cartoon at that period of time. I'm not kidding; it actually was. I remember coming home at lunchtime and watching it every day.
Yeah.
Anyway, very cool. And so you mentioned that you kind of changed your voice a little bit when you were writing for it, and so presumably that was intentional. And what did that look like?
What's interesting is you look at the Andromeda Strain, and that was his first novel that he wrote under his own name. He had done some other stuff under a pen name that I don't. And then it was also it was his first novel, and it was really, in a lot of ways, the most technical. And the thing that just sort of blew me away is there's citations, there's all these acronyms, there's all these dates and places. He's very specific. This happened. And you go to look up any of that stuff, you Google it, which, by the way, of course, Google was not available, 50 years ago. And none of that stuff exists. None of it. It's all made up. I mean, every paper, the names of people at conferences, the number of people that were there, the questions, it's like he just really, so to kind of go back and adopt that sort of dry, like a lot of technical facts that are super convincing, and that just takes plain sort of hard work. That's just a lot of research. So that was one thing that I had to do. The other thing is, you look at Andromeda Strain, it's got a slightly different voice than the rest of Crichton's work because he grew and got better at writing over the course of his whole career. And so when you ask people what's Crichton's voice, well, it's not just one novel, so it's a good thing that I did love all of his novels, and I've read many of them. I've read lots of times. And so it was really kind of trying to synthesize his voice across his whole career. So instead of just Andromeda Strain, but that said, I did mirror some of the structure of Andromeda Strain. And a long story short is what I'm saying is the book starts off dry and then gets more intense and action driven as you progress through it. That's really intentional because that's how the original was. And I wanted to honor that.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. You've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Cool. Well, having read Robopocalypse and Robogenesis, which are, probably your most, well, anyway, they just have a certain voice, right? That it comes in little snippets, and they're almost like tiny short stories, right? That are coming in and then weaving together. I love both those books, but I love The Clockwork Dynasty even more. I thought that just I love that book. I could not put it down. I read it in about 2 days, but it had a different voice. I found.
Absolutely.
Right? Did you do that intentionally? Is that just just a function of the story
Man,
you're telling?
it's like a career. It's like this career, right? I mean, I finished this degree. I spent a lot of time and effort, obviously,
Yeah,
getting that degree, and I had a certain future for myself that I imagined. And then
yeah,
I wrote Robopocalypse, and it did really well. And I was in this position to keep writing Robopocalypse in different versions again and again for my
mm,
whole career and make a lot of money.
right,
and
right,
uh, and I couldn't do it, man. Like
mm,
I just couldn't do it. I didn't feel like that's not what I wanted to do. So every time I write a new novel, I'm into it. I'm going down. I'm trying to improve myself. And over the years, I've had kids. I've had life experiences.
mm,
I've had good things and bad things happen to me, and all of that goes into what I'm writing. And in a lot of ways, the longer the farther I get from the shore of that PhD and all that young idealistic, not that cynical Daniel Wilson with fresh out of school, like the farther I get from that, I think the more complex my writing gets, and hopefully the better. And so I love to hear that. I mean, you want your latest book to be the best book you've written,
right,
so
right.
you don't want to go the other direction. So yeah, I'm not trying to sort of recreate what I did in Robopocalypse over and
Mm-hmm.
over. I'm trying to. So that had Clockwork Dynasty had a really unique structure. It had some deeper, interesting themes. It
Mm-hmm.
has lots of ancient automatons
Yeah,
who
yeah,
are blending into society and forming a secret society. It is a little bit like Highlander with robots.
yeah,
So it has like that, just that stuff that I call it my inner sixth grader. Like it better make my inner sixth grader happy, whatever I'm writing. Like,
yeah.
I want to see robots sword fighting. But
Cool.
at the end of the day, I'm also trying to get better. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's got an evolved voice, I think.
Well, I
neat.
always find that the symbol of a good story for me is when I get to the end of it and I immediately look to see, is there a sequel? Is there a sequel? And I
Mhm.
did that right after the Clockwork
I
Dynasty.
get emails about that a little
Yeah.
bit, and I kind of, it all has to do with how successful a novel is, right? That's the appetite for whether you can sell the next one. And so
Right.
yeah, I mean, that one did okay, but it kind of just sort of came and went. So I
Oh,
wasn't. I have written a short story that takes place in the same world that explores kind of what happens with Elena, who it's one of those books where you start writing what you think is the most interesting, important character, and then a side character comes in, and you realize, like, oh, whoops, she's like way more interesting than my main character.
uh,
And so, at least from my perspective, I sometimes fall in love with different characters, and so
yeah.
Elena is really who I liked, and so I had to write more from her perspective. It's called One
And
for Sorrow.
is that in your anthology, your short story
Yeah,
anthology?
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in there.
Uh,
There's also a Robopocalypse short story that's in there that actually kind of became the seed of my thinking for Robogenesis.
okay. Yeah.
But a lot of times I'll write a short story to just get into a world before, and then decide later, like, okay, this is a full-on novel. Like, I'm going to get after this, really go for
Yeah.
it.
Well, I spent today actually reading your story from
Oh yeah.
you have an anthology called Robot Uprisings,
Mhm.
with other authors writing robot uprising short stories, and you've got the last one in here called Small Things, and it was great actually. I mean, it
Oh,
was
thanks.
it was like it was kind of like Robopocalypse, but condensed down to a fewer
Yeah,
pages, and then in nanobots, right, in the
yeah.
nano world kind of thing, and yeah, I just got a lot of these flavors from your short story that I remembered from your novels, which was really great.
Yeah, that's like I was doing kind of a Joseph Conrad, like, an Apocalypse Now, like kind of a madness and
Right.
phantasmagoria, just the idea that everything's made of these basic building blocks that can
Yeah.
be rearranged at a molecular level, and you know, trees that are breathing and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's pretty a lot of horror, but I like that one because it kind of just explores this notion that I like to think about, is just what happens when biological and mechanical ecosystems kind of combine, or if they ever did that. And so it's something I play with in Robogenesis, and just this notion that biology could be at some point kind of infiltrated by small self-propagating technological artifacts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's an interesting world.
Well, that's an interesting question. Always is, can you actually improve upon biology? Because biology is nanotech, right? It's evolved nanotech, and enzymes, proteins, man, they are the perfect little nano machines for doing what they do. And I wonder if we're ever actually going to design better machines to
Yeah, I
do that
mean,
similar sort of thing, or whether they'll have to be bigger, or if they can be smaller, who knows?
nature is kind of its own. Actually, nature is kind of its own utility function. Like an algorithm is going to determine, and whether you live or die and propagate is basically, your utility. And if you do well, there's more of you.
Right.
You get the opportunity to evolve. If you don't, then we never hear about that.
Yeah.
I have a little thing that it's something I've said before, but something I kind of noticed when I was in grad school is just this notion of natural grace, this idea of natural beauty, right? When you see, like, for instance, a deer bounding through the woods and you think, man, that's pretty. And you think a robot can never do that. But I think that in reality, what you're perceiving as beauty is really just like a high fitness. Like this is a very good solution to the problem of how to locomote through this environment in particular. And so as soon as a robot achieves a similar level of fitness or a similar, ability to move that well, we're going to perceive that as grace,
Right.
Natural grace. And there's really nothing natural about it. I mean, if you maximize the fitness, then you're going to get something that looks good because it's going to be a good solution to a problem.
Cool.
How far away do you think we are to that? Is that still a few decades? Do you have any kind of idea of where when we get there?
It's so hard, as the years pass. I've realized really it's how hard it is to predict this stuff. But I think that with Boston Dynamics, we've seen some of that stuff. Right now, Disney, has started using some of these robots as performers in their live shows, and they're doing crazy acrobatics, and they look amazing. They look better than people. I mean, they look just they're flipping around and flying around, and so in a lot of ways, I think we're there. But if you think about all the different environments and all the different ways that animals have solved, say, just locomotion, for instance, like that's a lot of problems to solve. And so there's going to be a lot of time before robots are able to figure all that stuff out.
But if you think about it from an AI perspective, I mean, we're kind of, depending on how you define grace and purpose fit, we're kind of there now with narrow AI, right? We have a very purpose-built artificial neural network that's been trained against some data set, and then it can come up with really good responses. I guess if you're a geeky computer scientist, you'll think that's grace.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I think the way humans are built, with all the whole prefrontal cortex and everything, like stuff that is really, really hard seems easy because we're really over machined to do it, right? And so a lot of things that machines are doing now that are incredibly impressive, just we take totally for granted, right? And we always have, really. I mean, so now they're speaking, and it's text to speech is starting to sound pretty realistic, and of course, just all the speech recognition that we take for granted, all the face recognition, gestures, everything, like they're just doing that now, and we don't. The only people maybe that would appreciate it are the computer sciences, geeky people, because everybody else is just like, well, yeah, that's normal, that's easy, right? It's like, well, a couple million years of evolution or something, and it becomes easy.
Well, on our podcast, I read this little thing off Facebook. What was it called? It was a bot. It was a obituary.
Eulogy.
The bot
Obituary.
obituary.
The
Have you ever seen this?
GPT-3 algorithm.
Yeah, GPT-3, sure.
So trained it on a data set of obituaries, and there was an obituary written, by this bot, and it was hilarious. It was like it was exactly what you would sort of expect a dumb, smart robot to do, right? It was all the right things were there, but they were just like just totally wrong, right? In the wrong context, they fit in kind of funny. And I wonder if that's that's the AI that we're creating, right? It can imitate things really well, but it's the standard. It's like the Chinese room problem, I guess, right, Daniel? It doesn't understand, and that is a problem because that is part of intelligence, especially when you want to figure out like once AI start making decisions in our lives for us, right, or start being legal entities and making judgments and things, you want to be able to ask that. Well, why? How did you get that answer? What is your
Yeah.
reasoning?
Yeah. The black
And we
box
can't get
problem.
that. Yeah. Do you think we're going to
Yeah.
solve that? Is that just a different kind of problem, or what is it?
I've like come down on different sides of this argument in the past. I mean, this particularly matters for stuff like autonomous vehicles. Like if somebody gets killed, you need to go back and figure out why. Why did it happen, and then also how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And I always thought that, like for autonomous vehicles, black box algorithms, which neural nets are essentially black box. There's no way to go through a neural network, and it's all just little tolerances that have been set. So there's no way to actually figure out what happened. It's just synaptics or whatever. So I always thought, that's going to be pretty tough. There's going to need to be an AI that looks at itself and tries to determine why it made those decisions. It's going to be trained. And but as I've watched the technology progress, I just don't know if people really care that much. Like I maybe mistook the value placed on human life. I sort of thought it was higher than it is. In reality, I think economically people are willing to make trade-offs that sort of are surprising to me.
Right.
Like if it works and it's convenient, they're willing to use it.
Oh yeah. Yes. I mean that explains traffic in the first place, right? I mean, I think we have like 30 or 40,000 people get killed in accidents. Yeah, right. It was an accident. No, I mean, you got into a big piece of metal. It was convenient. It was useful, and you roll the dice, and a certain number of people get killed, or are killed. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I can't predict. I mean, it's much easier to sort of just try to talk about technology. It's much harder to try to figure out how people are going to react to technology.
Right. Well, imagine if I think Noah Yuval Harari talks about this in his second book after Homo Deus, after Sapiens, a situation where an AI might make a decision to take away somebody's passport, right? They're screening things, it's following patterns, seeing who's going through airports, and then suddenly you find, you're on a no-fly list because an AI program put you on it, and now you can't maybe drive or travel or all these things. And so, what's your appeal, right? What do? That's
this
when
happens
you will
all the
need
time when people get kicked off of your YouTube channel taken away, your Twitter account canceled, or whatever. And a lot of times that's automated, right? They're just trying to, and then people are like, "How do I get this reinstated?" And everybody's like, "I got no idea."
Yeah, because they don't even know why it happened, right? And nobody can answer that question. Like, well, it's just a black box.
But you need precious human attention, right, to go sort it out. And that's not how these companies are scaling, right? Precious human attention is the one thing they don't have. So, then they're not going to give it to your ass. So, I mean, I think honestly that kind of automated decision making like that's going to creep into our lives in a lot of different ways, and it'll have small repercussions. You're whatever, you didn't get the extra coffee, after X number of purchases or whatever, all the way up to we don't know why it decided to fire the missile. We thought that you were an enemy. So, I mean. Aside from putting a human in the loop, which is the defeats the purpose of these systems. Yeah, I mean,
I know the solution. Hey, we just need to enslave a superintelligence. Simple.
But the superintelligence, I think you might have just compounded the problem there.
Oh, okay.
Now, one solution that I always liked from my days in robotics was the committee approach, where you get 5 intelligences, and then you have them all argue with each other about the right answer, and then you also have them argue about why they're right. And so doing that, you get more than an average, but sort of less than you'd want. But that's one way, the committee approach.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, how do we get there? How do we get to that? Like, I mean, we talk about really deep neural networks, or is it like whole brain emulation? Like, can we upload our brains? Like, how do we make something a general intelligence?
I've got to say, I have been more focused on the science fiction-y elements of things for the past 10 years than and even worse, for the last 2 years, I've moved away from novels, well, since quarantine, and into television and film. So that's even a degenerate form of of the science fiction novel.
Yeah.
So
I was honestly, you could have fed me anything, and I would have been like, that sounds amazing. But speaking of that, you did do a really cool thing with Dust, with this iterations audio drama. We listened to it, and Dan Stevens and Callista Flockhart were on it. This project is just amazing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote this short story called Iterations, where a lot of authors all wrote the same story, or from the same premise, right? So we wrote from the premise that an airplane takes off from San Francisco or from Tokyo and comes into San Francisco, and when it lands, it's been 20 years. So like, what happens? Or it's been some amount of time has passed, right? And so that got adapted into a podcast, or my particular story, and several other really great stories. And then since then, I've been actually developing that as a feature, as a film. And part of like what's really interesting about it is just it's given me the opportunity to think a lot about what it means to have sort of, I mean, pardon this term, it's a terrible term, but it just works from vocabulary, but sort of prophylactic social technology, filling in the gaps in our daily lives, right? So bear with me, but like, robotics is designed to solve tasks that are dull, dirty, and dangerous, right? And now human interaction has an element of danger, right? That's why we're using Zoom so much. It's why we're using Instacart. We have all kinds of technologies that are filling in the cracks in order to address this kind of dangerous problem of human interaction and just minimizing the danger. It's not like people aren't interacting, but so I kind of imagined, what does that mean for people, right? And it kind of jumps into the future. And this guy comes back and he finds that his wife is still there. She's not remarried or anything. It's not a castaway scenario. And basically he starts to suspect that she's maybe found someone else that she's not telling him about. And then he eventually finds out that she's got kind of a social, like kind of an Alexa sort of device that has filled in part of doing relationship duties, and also that it's modeled after him. It's built after all of his technological sort of breadcrumbs and everything about him. And so he's literally sort of been replaced by this technology. It's a different iteration of him, and she's in love with it, right? And the thing that he kind of learns about his wife, since she's been interacting with this technology, at first to get over her grief, and then later she sort of just starts living with it, is really something that I found that I've seen in the world, and something that I found in my personal life. So I have this Echo, and when you talk to it, it gives you whatever you want, right? So it's a piece of technology that you interact with through a human user interface, which is communication, just speaking. And it's also female, which has got its own set of problems, but it instantly obeys, and it doesn't ask for anything in return. And this is really kind of the area I've been thinking a lot about, is reciprocity. So when you interact with technology, it gives you what you want, and you don't have to reciprocate, right? And so we've gotten used to it, I think, over the last couple of years. All of these prophylactic technologies don't require reciprocation. And so now, they let, whatever, we get a gap in COVID for 2 weeks or something, and you go to a restaurant, and you're communicating with somebody to exchange a good or service, and people are like not treating service workers very nicely, I guess, let's just say. And I think it's because our ability to reciprocate is eroding the more we interact with this technology. And the worst part is that the technology is very lifelike. And so it's operating on human channels, and we're relearning what it means to interact with somebody in these transactional situations. And we're not even giving people the basic acknowledgement that they're humans, or that they deserve a smile, or all the things that the channels that are invisible to these technologies that we've surrounded ourselves with. And so really that's what Iterations is exploring, is on some level what that erosion of reciprocity means for one man and his relationship, and also for society. And I worry about this because I got kids, and they're constantly yelling at this lady, in our kitchen. Right. And, is that, where do I want them to end up? I say please and thank you to my my echo. I shout at her though a fair amount too.
I was talking about,
you know.
I was talking with my wife about this the other night. We were talking about like how most of our kids' interactions and social interactions are online or texting, or there's like, it does feel like there's this growing gap. When these kids, like, what's the psychological impact, or what's the societal impact, and that at 10 years from now we have a generation that had their formative years without direct human interaction. I was just looking at some old rerun of a show where everyone's in the same room and they're talking to one another, and there's no concern, there's no mask, there's no plexiglass or anything like that. Like everyone's just, and all I could think of was like, everyone is eating each other's spit right now.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to do that? We were allowed to do that. We were allowed to sort of share the space, and we don't do that anymore. And the first thing to go, is manners, right? Like we're not forced. When you're facing someone, you suddenly, as I've been going back to the office a little more, people who I met for the first time online, I wasn't sure of, suddenly I kind of like them more. I get the chance to interact. There's an opportunity to
I think of it as dropped channels, right? Like you think of like human interaction as this really rich, broad swath of different channels. I mean, obviously there's sight and sound, which is what's, we're communicating right now over that, but there's so many channels that are dropped right now that we're not communicating on that we normally do. And I've just sort of seen this popping up in a lot of different ways. Like I recently had the opportunity to see my little nieces and nephews, and I wrestled my kids a lot. We're always goofing around, and I grabbed one of my nieces and just like she froze up, right? Like these kids, they're not used to like physically physical, right? And I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna really have to back up here. And like everybody's so skittish, and then we see each other now and they say like, hey, so I forgot how to do small talk. And it's like, well, what do you think small talk is? It's manners, and manners are hard. Like looking at other people, and on some level I think manners, to tie it back to reciprocity, I mean, they are empathy. It's putting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking, what does that person think, running what you're about to say through their perspective. And I'm terrible at this before. I'm even worse now. So like, it's tough. It's tough on everybody. But the question is, are we forgetting how to be human? And then the other question that I talk about in iterations is, if we're forgetting how to be human, is the technology more human than we are? Because the technology can figure out how to do small talk, and it doesn't even have a dog in the fight in terms of needing to be respected or any of that. So, and partially this also has to do with just this notion that our social circles have really collapsed, right? And so all that tertiary and secondary, a lot of those friendships and things have been put on hold. I go to a coffee shop to write. When they reopened it recently, I had no idea how important it was to me until I got in there and I knew all the extras in my life. I knew where they sat, I knew like all their mannerisms, and I didn't realize I even had that knowledge. And so the question is like, whenever you collapse all that stuff, we have these vibrant ecosystems of social life, and then it gets collapsed, and who deals with it? Your partner, right? If you're lucky enough to have a partner around the house, right? So suddenly we're all doing like a lot of extra social work for each other, right? And so what does that mean? And can technology, and are we responsible for each other in that way? Even, is it my problem? Is it another person's problem to take on all that extra load? Or is there a place for technology to step in? And the question is, is she better off with the AI?
Right.
For this particular situation where we have constrained social networks and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously, what you write, everything you write is a product of the times. And so iterations really, especially the feature version I'm developing, has really come to reflect a lot of the stuff I'm thinking about now that I'm trapped in my house for a year and a half or however long.
So for like, just sort of ask about, the process, like how you got from a PhD in robotics and science and into a creative process. I was looking at
the device, I'm thinking of the device that you used in Robopocalypse, like where, you've got a lot of different stories happening and then they slowly come together. I could just imagine having the process of putting that together is like a drawing of, I would have to draw it out.
Oh yeah.
And like,
I did.
Yeah. And just like, so how, could you talk a little bit about how you got into this, how you made that transition and how your process has evolved since then?
So, I mean, in my own life, I've been really lucky because I've always just chased things I am excited about, right? I mean, I could say love, but I don't always love writing. It sucks. I like to sit and write every day. Sometimes it sucks, but like I'm passionate about it and I want to learn more, right? And like I've always wanted to learn more about robots and science and stuff. And so I wanted to write science fiction as a kid. That didn't work out right away for me. I was happy to learn about real robots, it's like, so for me, it's all about, it's like eating your pancakes, like eating the middle part first, like with all the syrup on it, you just, and you save all the other BS for later. You say, I'll deal with that if I'm still hungry, right? If I have to. And so, that's how I've approached my life and what I do with the bulk of my day, right? I've learned about robots for a long time. I had this opportunity to write and think about science fiction and the future and technology. And so I've just been doing that. But, with Robopocalypse and the idea of all these plot points coming together, with Robopocalypse, I just wrote my favorite parts. I just thought of my favorite moments. God, wouldn't it be neat, if this happened? Like, I just imagine a robot running across a battlefield with a broken strut in its leg, and every time its thigh raises up, while it sprints, it arc welds it, just like a stuttering light, while it's arc welding itself and sprinting across a field, like with the dust trail. Like, neat. Okay, let's write that. We're going to start there. That's got me excited. That's the middle of the pancake. Right? My inner sixth grader is super pumped about that. Like, and then, with Robopocalypse, I really strung together a lot of those really visual scenes that I was, imagining and getting excited about. And then as the years have gone by, like I said, I've had kids, I've had life experience. And so I go for that less I still have those visual things I get excited about, but it's more thematic for me now, I think. I think more about how, being a parent makes you vulnerable, or like, how is technology changing us? What are the boundaries between our technology and the people that it supports? Another thing that's big, that's really happened just in the last probably 5 years is, I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in North Tulsa, which is the Cherokee Nation. I'm a Cherokee citizen. And I never considered being Native to have anything to do with my writing. I thought my whole shtick was, this is the robotics guy who writes about robots. Let's ask him if they're going to kill us. And like for a long time it was. Robopocalypse, of course, has a ton of Native characters. A ton of it takes place in Oklahoma. It's essentially Indians saving the world from robots. The two things I care and know about. I mean, it's totally random. Very much surprised me that people were interested in reading that at the time. But over the years, I've come to realize that like that Native perspective is actually pretty interesting to people. Mm-hmm. And I had totally just assumed it was normal, as kids do. You think that where you grow up, this is normal. Everybody's Native in Oklahoma, blah blah blah. So now I'm being a lot more intentional about invoking Native themes, making sure just exploring that whole aspect of everything, and just letting it be a part of my voice.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very important part of your work too, because even Amped as well, right? Based in Oklahoma, or a large portion of it, right?
Yeah, those trailer parks, man. I can describe the shit out of those things for good reason.
Your stories, they lend themselves to film so well. You're obviously inspired by a lot of the films. I do kind of want to ask you about one film in particular, if that's okay. That's The Matrix.
Yeah, no, I have strong opinions, of course, about any science fiction nerd would about the Matrix trilogy. I have a buddy of mine named Zach Penn, who's a screenwriter who wrote Ready Player One, and I've worked with him on some projects, including Robopocalypse. So it's been interesting to get a little bit of behind the scenes on the whole evolution of the new Matrix film. So the original Matrix was obviously groundbreaking, right? I mean, it was incredible on so many levels, and it was a beautiful hero arc, right? You see this character go from, I mean, really just an everyday normal guy to sort of, resisting the call to adventure and then being forced into it and then kind of coming out the other side. And the problem is, like, whenever you go on a hero arc from like zero to a godlike abilities, that's like really tough to like go from there, right? But then you're also in this conundrum in Hollywood because, it's Keanu. Like, you gotta like, I mean, you're not gonna like take him out and focus on someone else's arc, So you really have to like balance these things. And I think it's just so hard because I'm like, I liked Keanu's arc in The Matrix. I'm sort of done with it. Like,
Yeah.
I did like how the mythology expanded in the how it made sense that there were ghosts and glitches and werewolves and things like that, spooky things that are really just glitches in the Matrix. I love the existence of programs that are just walking around the Matrix that, exist to us as real stuff. I'm not sure if I have high hopes for any of this stuff. Like, every time you get a sequel or a prequel or a remake, like, on some level, it's like nostalgia. It's like the thing you love, you're never going to get that high again from the first one. Yeah. But maybe they'll surprise me. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing it for sure.
It's too bad it was a DuckTales ending, I guess, for the Matrix, right? The original.
I mean, I never could completely understand what the ending was, and I've diagrammed those films. Like, I've like tried to figure out exactly, I've pitched Matrix sequels actually,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, and my whole thing is just like, A, how do I explain the batteries, and B, like, how do I explain that horrible speech from Agent Smith about how humans are mammals and therefore we reproduce like until we, it doesn't make any damn sense. But yeah, I mean, a virus might make more sense, but
It's
the
the
mammals,
smell.
it's the smell. I mean, that's really great. I mean, and in fact, I mean, there is, as I get older and older, I realize like we all are like issued a corpse whenever we're born and we're trapped inside it until the day we die. It's like a horrible way to look at things, but like we're all locomoting. What is it's made of meat, that short film,
Yep. Terry Bisson's little short story, micro story. Yeah.
They're made of meat.
They're made of meat. God, every now and then I think about that, and the thing is, you just can't think about it for too long.
Well, you are pretty connected with kind of that screenwriter's world, and I was kind of doing the math yesterday, and I feel like you've got I think the highest movie rights sold to publishing works ratio of any sci-fi author that we've interviewed. You just did a script, as I understand it, right? This The Blue Afternoon That Lasted Forever.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, look, like The Blue Afternoon That Lasted Forever is a short story I wrote for Bim Bova for Carbide Tipped Pens, anthology. And I wrote it when my first I had one kid, my daughter, and she was about 3. And I was putting her to bed one night, and I was doing our usual bedtime routine, which involved me saying the same things, reading a book, how you do. And I was tucking her in, and she grabbed the covers from me, and she was like, "I do it." And I realized that this pattern that we had was gonna have to change. And it kind of hit me that like this process of raising this little kid was just going to be me letting go of her more and more every day until I finally completely let go of her and she leaves and goes and lives her life, right? And man, that really hit me. It was like really heavy. And so I starting from that thematic kind of core, I imagined a future where there's a guy who studies black hole simulations, and there's a such thing potentially as primordial black holes, the pinpricks that have the mass of mountains or moons. And what if how would you detect something like that moving through space, right? Like the gravitational perturbations would be pretty difficult. And so the story is about a guy letting go of his daughter, but it's also a story about, black holes ripping the world apart. So it's, the metaphors there are pretty clear about having to let go. And so I wrote that short story, and I knew it was good actually when I had an early draft of it, and I was at ORICon, the Oregon Science Fiction Convention here in Portland. And I was doing a reading, and I just decided to read it off my phone. I was like, hey, I got like this half-assed version of this story that I emailed to myself. I'm going to read it. And like, it's just waterworks, me, like, I realized I was going to cry. Like, it's like knowing you're going to throw up and being like, okay, I can't. Oh my God, I'm gonna, I've been crying in front of all these people. And I realized it's like the best thing I ever wrote. So I decided to adapt it as a feature. So I wrote a spec script. It's much less depressing than the short story, but it was great. There was a bidding war, and Amblin actually was interested, and there were several places that were interested, and it went to Paramount. And so I'm working with the production company that did A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2. And they're wonderful. And so, yeah, we're currently connecting with directors. I mean, it's super active. It's one of the most, like I have sold a lot of rights, but I don't have a lot of movies, like none. So, I'm like, I've kind of dedicated this decade of my life to getting something on screen. I'd love to see that.
It sounds pretty promising. You mentioned Amblin, but also I understand J.J. Abrams and Sony and MGM were all bidding for this too.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you the very first thing I ever wrote was How to Survive a Robot Uprising. It had no plot. It was nonfiction. It was silly. And it sold to Paramount also, actually. Funny, I've never thought of that, because it was 15 years ago. It sold to Paramount. It had Mike Myers attached to star in it. It was a comedy. There was a screenplay written by Tom Lennon and Ben Garant. They wrote Night at the Museum, and they're Lieutenant Dangle and Travis Jr. from Reno 911. Hilarious guys. Movie got canceled, after Mike Myers did Love Guru or whatever. So like from the very beginning, I've had all that happening, and I've always considered that as the second half of what allows me to write as a career, because like, I think of ideas as like fish food. I have the ideas, I sprinkle the fish food, and then everybody comes to take a little bite. Dramatic rights, literary rights, audio book rights, like whatever I can do, whatever I can sell, then I love to see it adapted in those different forms. So I've been writing screenplays since then, and trying to sell them. And I'm only just now kind of gotten to the point where, in my career, where it's sort of caught up with where my novel writing career, started out in 2010 or around there. So it's been really great to be able to spread out and experience these, stories through different media, and, have those sort of different hats I can wear.
And you're comfortable with those different hats? You think they'll put back on the novel hat?
God, man. I mean, I'm itching to do it, because what happens is writing a novel is really lonely. You're by yourself. Nobody's messing with you, for a year. So you do that for a year, right? And then at some point I start bothering my wife to read drafts, and that's the extent of my like human interaction. Research, maybe I go to NASA or something, but like writing a screenplay is the opposite, man. Like everybody's got an opinion. You're not necessarily that valuable, So for instance, I had an idea for a screenplay a few years ago. God, I mean, it made everybody cry in the room when I pitched it. It's basically about a guy in Antarctica with a robot that's in the form factor of a dog, and it's kind of like your classic man and dog versus wild story. I wrote the screenplay. I sold it to Lionsgate. They shelved it. That's it. I'm done. They paid me for it. They own it. I can't write a novel about it. I can't. Those characters aren't mine, man. That's like work for hire, baby. It's like, and I can't deal with that. Like I gotta own my characters. So that's why I establish everything as intellectual property first. I write it as a short story at the very least, but usually I'll develop a novel if I'm going to adapt it into film. At the very least, I'll always be in charge of those characters, in in the literary sense. And so, what happens though is you get lonely whenever you write novels, and you get deluged with people, and it's too complex of human interactions, to try to get something made and produced and all that. And so it's kind of like, you just turn the shower knob a little bit, and then there's the part where it feels great, and then it gets too hot, and you turn it back, and there's the part in the middle where it feels great, and then it gets too cold. And so I kind of am going back and forth between the two careers in that kind of a way.
Sounds like a good peer review process, honestly, for, you start with a short story, get your IP locked down, do the script, get the peer review process, and then maybe a novel later, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it goes that way, right? Sometimes you're feeling it as a graphic novel, or you're feeling it as a comic or a short story. I've written video games, I've written all that stuff, and I mean, it's just, all of it is just a different challenge, and it's just a different interesting thing. And I got to say, like, being very logical, being very, very much a computer science guy. I came out, with this feeling that, like, hey, the product should just be judged on its own merits. It is what it is. You create it, you deliver it, people like it or they don't. And that is so wrong. It's all about the relationships. It's all about your ability to communicate what you want to do to people, or to communicate what you have done to people in a way that they'll understand that it's interesting and worth their time. And so I think of all that as the launch pad. I mean, like, the launch pad's not very sexy. When the rocket flies off into outer space, that's sexy. That's the product. That's your novel. But without the launch pad, the rocket's not going anywhere. It's going to sit in a museum. So, like, you really got to focus on all that stuff. And honestly, I've gotten to like it over the years. I think it's an important, integral part of, actually getting stuff made and getting, butts in seats, or getting eyes on the page.
I can see where, the getting into the pitch process and getting good at it, and establishing those relationships is such an essential part of it that people don't necessarily consider. I heard it described once, as getting something like a project made into a film. It's like going up to base camp 5 or 6 times until you finally get a shot at,
it's a freak storm. There's always some kind of freak storm. Yeah. And after a while, you start to realize that it's too many freak storms for it to statistically be a freak storm. It's just that there's so many moving parts and so many things that can go wrong. One of them usually does. But yeah, that process, my wife's a child psychologist. And when we met, I thought I was pretty smart, with my PhD. And she was like, actually, I think you're just high verbal. You're just good at explaining stuff. Not really that smart.
Thanks, honey.
And I'm like, well, fine. If I'm a used car salesman, then that's what I'll be. That's great. That's fine. That's a type of intelligence, isn't it?
Well, often with film too, it seems like a lot of people coming up with the ideas are just having to make the film themselves. Is that something you've ever thought of doing, like just finding a way to fund it and find your own director, find and produce it yourself, or at least take a position in some way? Have you thought about just doing it yourself just to get it made?
I'm very intimidated by that whole process, and I don't feel like my skill set is there, right? Like, I grew up addicted to reading science fiction short stories. Like, that's the thing that, you can only really sustain one serious total obsession when you're a kid, right? Some people it's comic books, some people it's music, like, it can be anywhere. But for me, I know, like, in my heart, that's what I'm good at, because that's what I love. And I was not, filming movies with Super 8 cameras like JJ was when I was a kid. I mean, so for me, I get that pleasure, thankfully, from writing novels, right? I mean, I write a novel, it goes out into the world, people get back to me. I get to have created that thing. And that's the thing that drives screenwriters crazy, because you can make millions of dollars and never have anything created, and so that you're a creative, everybody's a creative person. Everybody has something inside that they need to put on the outside. And so if you go through your whole career and you don't have that, it drives you crazy. So for me, I don't feel that burning kind of obsessional need to just get something made on film. That's because I can, like, I quit writing novels, but I wrote a couple of short stories in the last couple of months. It affects my mood I'm so happy. Like, if I just write 500 words, it's like I wake up in the morning and I go outside, and Portland is like dark and misty and rainy and shitty, and I just take a deep breath and I'm like, I get to write science fiction today. Holy shit, this is amazing. I love it, and I have a big smile on my face. So I get those kicks from just putting words on a page. It's a lot cheaper and quicker than directing a movie.
Can you talk a bit about what you're doing right now? What work you're working on?
Yeah. So I am currently I'm adapting a short story I wrote called A History of Barbed Wire, which is kind of a Blade Runner in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Kind of it's really fun. It's a fun short story, and I think it's in my collection, Guardian Angels and Other Monsters. I'm adapting it with Sterling Harjo, who's a buddy of mine. He's a native guy. He's from Okmulgee, south of Tulsa, where I grew up. He just made a television show called Reservation Dogs on Hulu, which is freaking amazing, and is winning all kinds of awards. And it's really funny. Like, he's been working for years and years, and just overnight, man, like this thing is caught on, and now I can't get him on the phone. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
But no, so we're adapting that for Amazon, and it's amazing. We just had a call today. We're doing a pilot and all that, and so I'm doing that. It's taking a lot of time. I'm also I have The Blue Afternoon that I'm paying attention to and may need to do rewrites on. And then there's always I can't talk about it, but there's always Robopocalypse. And with Robopocalypse, I kind of came full circle because I ended up doing drafts on that for Amblin and Steven, and like it's it's been really cool to have my screenwriting career catch up with my novel career. It took like 10 years or however long Robopocalypse has been with Amblin, but I really do have hope that that's going to see it's going to come out in some incarnation in the future. And man, I can't wait to just go back to those worlds and just kick the dust off that and bring it all back. And also, the second that I get an opportunity to have Robopocalypse adapted for the screen, I've got the third novel to finish.
Yeah.
It's a trilogy, and it's always meant to be a trilogy. And I just I just need the opportunity to sell it. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to.
And I think that's worth mentioning to anybody who doesn't know is that the novel Robopocalypse, the movie rights were sold to Amblin, which is the production company for Steven Spielberg, right?
So 2009-ish, 2010, right around there. Robopocalypse, I had written 100 pages of the novel, and a scout sent it to Amblin before I had sold it to Random House. So I was still negotiating between the houses, and they bought it. And then I sold it to Random House, and then which is now Penguin Random House, and will soon be Penguin Simon and Schuster at Random House. It will soon just be, the publishing house. Yeah, right. Oh my God, it's pretty tough to get a bidding war with one publishing house. Anyway, so yeah, it was an amazing. It was a nerd's dream come true, and so they did all this work developing the film, and ultimately, it hasn't come out. It hasn't gone into production, but it's come so close a few times. It's kind of just been this itch that I can't scratch for 10 years.
He's a busy guy, that Steven Spielberg.
That's Steven Spielberg. He seems to keep himself busy. Yeah. So,
well, if you Google Robopocalypse now in film, it came out in 2020 and was directed by Michael Bay.
Oh well, no, there was a Michael Bay version that ultimately also didn't work out. Actually, somebody just released a movie called Robopocalypse. I just forwarded I saw it and I forwarded it to Amblin, and I have heard nothing else about that movie. So I don't know what happened, but it was a B movie that somebody just kind of made.
That's unfortunate.
I mean, it's honestly, it's flattering. Like if I see the word Robopocalypse used around, I wonder, I wonder if they're using it because of my book or whatever. But, I mean, you write stuff that goes out into the world. People have opinions. People emulate it. People hate it. They try to not to emulate it. I mean, it's cool just to be at the table, right? Just to sort of be participating in whatever's happening.
Yeah, that's a good viewpoint, and a different viewpoint than what a trademark lawyer might have.
Yeah, well, I let them take care of it. Trust me, I don't think anybody's going to fool around with Steven Spielberg.
No,
not for long anyway. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and he's like the one director you'd want, right? I mean, imagine for yourself, it's a dream come true.
Can you even? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Obviously, like that's who I'd want. But I mean, also it's in a lot of ways, Robopocalypse is a native story. So bringing in native storytellers would also be really exciting. So and again, like I mean, you just realize if I write every day. It's like what I do, and I look at a blank page, and there's infinite incarnations of everything, and you have to make it manifest as a thing. And as you do that, you become less precious about all the incarnations an idea can take. And I've never really been that precious about it, mainly I think because I came from science and engineering, where people are constantly shitting on what you're doing. They say, why is it important? I think it's already been done. Are you sure that's the best way? And and that's the way it's done, and that's a good thing because it makes it better. And so I love seeing my ideas go out and proliferate, and I would love to see it happen on a screen too. And I'm just not that precious about exactly who it goes through or anything like that. It's just be fascinating.
Tristan already told you that it's going to happen, Daniel. So,
it is.
Don't have to worry.
Thanks.
It is.
Well, we really enjoy being
at
the table too. We really enjoy being at the table this way by getting to talk to you about your work and participate as fandom. And we really love your work.
Yeah, and our listeners do too, I'm sure.
Part of being an author, is you have to be out there, like going to conferences, going to conventions, on Twitter, talking to people, sharing stuff. And, quarantine, I just haven't had the energy for that. And I also moved over into, like I said, I haven't been writing novels. I don't have any new novel to promote. So I've kind of been loving this whole hermit lifestyle a little bit, but I'm also realizing now that, I really miss just talking about this stuff and having these ideas and sharing them is half the fun,
I agree.
Create these, you write this stuff down so that, you can see what people think.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, I feel, I don't know about you or anybody else, but I don't think there should ever be the pressure to be on social media. As an author, there's some amazing authors who don't have a social media presence, but they have a great blog presence, or they do long form interviews or what have you. To me, that's good engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with what kind of person you are. Like, honestly, it's probably better not to try to fake it. Some people thrive on that stuff, oh gosh, who am I trying to think of?
Cory Doctorow probably, or
Shannon McGuire.
Not Cory. You'll know whenever. I cannot believe I'm blanking on his name. I'm looking for his book because I know the Forever War, not the Forever War, the other one, the Old Man's War.
John Scalzi.
Scalzi. Oh my God, is there a more entertaining human?
Yeah.
And like you look at someone like that and you're like, I shouldn't even be allowed to interact with people. It's just all the energy should just go to people who love it and are good at it. And then, I met Neil Stephenson one time and I was like, this I can be like him. I prefer this, leave me alone, read my book. I'm somewhere in between, but yeah, I agree. I don't, but unfortunately that's not the world we live in. You are really pressured, and it does affect, your advances and stuff like that. If you've got a huge social media following, that's just a sales tool and it's all numbers and it kind of sucks, but it's the way it goes.
Mm-hmm. There's no tenure in being a sci-fi book author.
Well, unless you're Scalzi. I think he signed like a 13-book deal. So you essentially got tenure. I'm really fanning out about Scalzi.
Well, we've actually got a copy of his book coming soon, the Kaiju Preservation Society.
Oh my
So
God,
that'll
that
be
sounds
coming
awesome.
soon, but that'll be out in March. So and he's just wild on social media, and he's fun, and he just takes pictures of the
You should see him
tree
at a
and says,
convention. You should see him
"Oh,
in
I
a
imagine."
room. The guy is amazing. Yeah.
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 That's
I
a
mean,
lot
some
of
people
fun.
are performers like that. They thrive on it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all somewhere in that,
Mhm.
in between misanthrope and whatever the opposite of that is.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for your time tonight.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely.
Yes.
Really enjoyed
All
the
right, maybe I'll
conversation.
see go entertain that 3-year-old now.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Okay,
great to
yeah.
meet you. Thanks for
Cool. Yeah,
talking to
great
us.
chatting,
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate
A lot of
your
Have a
time.
good
gratitude.
night.
Thank you, Daniel. That was awesome. Can't wait to see Robopocalypse on the big screen, happening soon. Okay, listeners, we would love to hear what you think of the show. If you like us, even if you don't like us, can you just rate us on your app or on a website? You can even go to IMDb and let us know. We want to improve, so let us know what you think of the show. We'd love to hear from you. All right, thank you for joining us. Until next time.